The exclusive home of ESPN Radio in Cleveland and Chattanooga is ESPN Cleveland 1013. It's never been easier to listen. Just download the free ESPN Cleveland 1013 app from our website, espncleveland1013.com. And with that, I'm very excited to introduce and bring on Rich Clark, the Executive Director of the College Football Playoff. And Rich, are you there with us?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. We've got you loud and clear. And first of all, I want to lead off with this. We really appreciate you taking the time to join our show today. And I want to start off by saying thank you so much for your service to our country. Very decorated Air Force, United States Air Force Lieutenant General, command pilot, and just kind of looking at all your Air Force credentials as a son of a man who served for the United States Air Force. Very thankful for your service.
Well, I appreciate that so much. And let me say, at first, it's an honor to be on your show, and it was an honor to serve. I loved my time in the Air Force, and it was a great 38 years, but I am loving my role right now as CFP Executive Director. So love talking about it, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
Well, Rich, this is Jim Gum, man, and we really appreciate you coming on with us. Now, tell our listeners out there, how in the world does somebody that spends 38 years in the United States Air Force transition into being the executive director of the college football playoffs? Those two are dynamically different, so how in the world did this happen?
Man, I ask myself that every day, Jim, because I am so grateful to be here. But I will tell you, better lucky than good is what I always say. And I feel blessed to be here because I was the superintendent of the United States Air Force Academy. That was my final job. And we were in the Mountain West Conference, and I was obviously on the board for the Mountain West Conference. And I was part of the search for our commissioner. We transitioned from Craig Thompson, who was our former commissioner, to Gloria Navarez, who's our current commissioner of the Mountain West. And I met the search firm who did that search, and I also happened to be selected to be on the selection committee because I was going to retire, and I got nominated by our board as the Mountain West nominee for the selection committee, and I got picked for it. So I had two things going for me. One, I was going to be on the future selection committee, and two, I knew the search firm who subsequently did the search to replace Bill Hancock, who was my predecessor. So the long, convoluted story goes, they said, hey, we got a guy on the selection committee who might be interested in filling Bill's position, which he can never fill Bill's position because he's
That's
amazing.
Bill Hancock.
Bill Hancock, absolutely. And I knew the search firm, and they were like, oh, we know that guy. So those two pieces came together. They asked me if I'd put my name in the hat. I did, and somehow they made the mistake of hiring me, and here I am.
Well, I'll say this once again. This is Andy here. We're with Rich Clark, Executive Director of the College Football Playoff, and I do not think it's a mistake at all. One thing that I really like, and I know a lot of people, college football fans around the country, like this, is you played football at the Air Force Academy. You're a linebacker on that monumental 1986 team that went 12-1. I believe finished 5th in the coaches poll that season. So you've not only got the executive experience, but the experience as a player as far as grassroots go. So that bodes very well for your future as the director of the college football playoff. So I believe college football is in great hands when it comes to the playoff with you at the helm. And also I want to throw this out there. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance, Scotty Boykin, who's coached some wrestling over there at the Air Force Academy.
Yes. He is awesome, and we have a great wrestling team. Those guys are just phenomenal. One of my favorite, of course, the football team. I can say it now because I'm not the superintendent anymore. Football team was my favorite, and wrestling was my next favorite because they were some warriors. And Scotty was just a great, great teammate for all of us. So that's great.
All right, Rich, let's talk about football now. So you've got 1 year of the 12-team playoff under your belt. What kind of grade would you give the entire playoffs from last year?
Oh, man. Okay. Well, I would give it a B+. I would give it a B+. And I say that Honestly, going into it, when I first came on board last June, and me and our whole team here, which I love our team here at the CFP. There's only 24 of us, but it is a solid team. I'd go to war with these folks any day.
Okay.
But we said, if there's one thing that we know 100% for certain is that we're not going to get this 100% right. But we need to get it to a point where we can make some tweaks. And we're not missing the big rocks. We get the big rocks right so that we can then tweak it to that perfect place. And I think we did that last year. Those campus games were just spectacular.
Yes.
I went to two. I went to Ohio State and I went to Notre Dame. I have never been in a stadium like either of those places at that moment, and it was just spectacular. And I think you just couldn't deny that we started off in great fashion. The way that those institutions put those games on, it was just amazing. Then our bowl partners for the quarterfinals and semifinals, they brought that tradition of college football to those 6 games, and they were also just fantastic games. And then in Atlanta, the championship game, I couldn't have been happier with the way that came off. Now, the areas that we really have to figure out, there are some things in there in all of those games that we can do better, right? Some things that we can tweak so that they run a little bit more smoothly, that the fans get the full level of enjoyment that they deserve from it, and that our teams have a great transition. We want the team experience and the coaches to really have some great experiences. So there's some things in there that we're going to tweak, internal things that maybe the general public didn't see, but we saw and we know, and we need to get them fixed. But then when you talk about the way that we seeded the teams last year, I think that we could have done better, and we are going to change that this year. Last year, the top 5 conference champions got into the playoff, and then the top 4 got buys, the top 4 of those conference champions. This year, we're going to go with the straight seeding.
Right.
And I think that's going to be a really significant change. It's going to give us better competition early on, and it's really going to give those teams the positions in the bracket that they deserve, that they earn throughout the season. So I think we'll have a good look and a better look even than we had last year. But overall, I was very proud of what our team did and how we executed that, and now we're just going to get better.
Hey, Rich, this is Jacob Mason. A great year one of the 12-team playoffs, but we have heard talks about the 16-team playoffs, and we've heard a couple different options, the 5-11 and the 4-4-2-2-1 models. Can you explain the differences between those for our listeners and what it means for the average football fan watching from home?
Sure. Great question, because those are sort of the two options that are on the table right now. So the 5+11 looks a lot like what we're going to be doing this coming year. So basically, the top 5 conference champions will get into the playoff, and then there will be 11 at-large teams. And all of those teams will be determined by the selection committee. So the top 16 teams will have a shot, but it'll first start off with the 5 highest-ranked conference champions will get in, and then the next 11 best teams, as the rankings go, will get in. So that's how that would go, by ranking, and they would be seeded by ranking. Does that one make sense?
Yes.
So that's the 5+11. Now, the automatic qualifier option is really, that's what you were talking about, the 4-4-2-2-1-1. So basically, in that model, the SEC and the Big Ten would each get 4 automatic qualifiers. The ACC and the Big 12 would each get 2 automatic qualifiers. There'd be 1 conference champion from
the group of 5?
Group of 6 that would get in. And then in this case, it would be 4-4, which is 8, 2-2, which is 12, 1, and then you'd have 3. If you go to 16, you could have 3 at-large teams that would get in. If you stayed at 12, it would be the 4-4-2-2-1-1,
right?
And that would add up to 12. So that whole look, with all that being said, it's about automatic qualifiers, and they would be automatically qualified by the conferences, potentially by playing games, or the conferences could defer to the selection committee and the highest ranked 4 teams from their conference would get in. There's a few different ways that it could go, but basically you have certainty in one model with the automatic qualifiers, but then in the 5+11, you take away a little bit of that uncertainty because now you're leaving it up to the selection committee to do its job, and you don't know going into the season what any conference is really going to have. They got to earn their way in.
Right.
So two very different models, both viable. I mean, we'll make whichever one that the commissioners decide upon. We'll make it work, but they are pretty different looks for college football.
With so many voices at the table, from the SEC, the Big Ten, to the Group of Five, how challenging is it to find a format that everyone feels good about?
Yeah, it's hard to find something that everybody's going to be happy with, and I don't know if we're gonna get to a point where everybody's happy with whatever we do, because even right now you have different commissioners that favor one model or another. And, neither one of them, you can't say that either one is right or wrong. They're just different. And for a lot of different reasons, they favor the one that, best suits their conference. And rightly so, because they're hired to represent their conference. That's their job. Of course, they have to consider what's great for college football in general, but that's a hard balance, right? It's kind of like Congress. Congress goes in, they're supposed to represent their district. Senators are supposed to represent their state, but they also have to do what's best for the country. And finding that balance is really tough. That's why Congress is Congress.
You don't have to go into detail there, man. We all know exactly what you mean. Now, Rich, I want to do me a favor here. Take your executive director's hat off, and this is Rich Clark, the person, the football player, has nothing to do with being on the executive director.
Rich, watch out for Jim's games here. Watch out for his games.
Exactly. Should the 4 power leagues all play the same number of conference games, whether it be 8 or be 9? In your opinion, this is just Rich Clark's opinion, should they all 4 play the same number of conference games?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So I think that really has to be up to the conferences, and here's why. I think they need to make sure that they're making an educated decision on this, right? Based on going outside of their conference, who they play outside of their conference. That is really going to matter because schedule strength matters. Wins and losses and all the things that go into this from a CFP perspective, I think they just need to really think it through and determine how many conference games they're going to play and how many out of conference, because it's gonna pay off. And if they're going to go with more out of the conference, they need to choose wisely who they're playing outside of their conference. The more games you choose, the more wisely you need to choose them. So I think I hate to say that they all need to do the same thing, because all conferences are not equal. They're not all created equal. They're all a little bit different. So I am a fan of leaving that up to them and then living with the consequences of your choices after that.
Yeah, great answer there. Once again, joined by Rich Clark, the executive director of the College Football Playoff. And kind of going off the conversation of conferences, there's been some notable figures in college football, such as Penn State head coach James Franklin. And I want to give you a heads up here. I'm a big Notre Dame guy. Going into the Orange Bowl, he said right there in the press conference going into the Orange Bowl that he felt like all teams should be in a conference to be eligible for the college football playoff. When that topic comes up, where do you personally and the committee as well stand on that?
So I disagree, and the reason is I believe that our selection committee will do a good job of ranking the top 25 teams, whether you're in a conference or not, and then you get seeded in accordance with your ranking. So I don't think that you have to be in a conference or out of a conference. You're going to play football. You're going to play the teams that you play, and we're going to rank you accordingly. So I disagree with that sentiment that you have to be in a conference to be able to get into the playoffs. We're going to rank you regardless of who you play. Now, I do think, though, that I go back to where I was, that if you're not in a conference, that you need to choose your opponents wisely.
Yes.
And not try to give yourself, not try to overthink it, but play a competitive schedule, and then, most importantly, win your games. And athletic directors and coaches really need to be thoughtful, and Notre Dame has done a pretty good job with that, I think. They play a good balanced schedule, and last year they won them. They had the one stumble with Northern Illinois, but then they really ran the table after that, and they did a good job. So they had a competitive schedule. They won the games, and they were able to really make it to that championship game. But you have to do that year in and year out, I think. So some of the other conferences, they have some built-in challenging schedules that gives them sort of a natural opportunity to do well in their conference and get into the playoffs. That's a good thing, too. But the bottom line is win your games, play a challenging schedule, and you got a shot.
Rich, explain to us how the cities that get the national championship games, how does that happen? I know there's a process,
a bidding process,
but how involved are you involved in that, and what are some of the criteria that you guys look at for the city that gets the bid?
Yeah, it is a bidding process, and we go out to the market, and people submit their packages. And there's a lot of variables in there, and the stadium that they have, the area around them for our events, their sort of track record with holding big events and hosting them in a good fashion. A lot of times we try to choose destination cities where people want to go, but we look at all of the things that make for a spectacular event, not just a spectacular game, but a spectacular event. And that is very important to us. And if you notice, most of the games we play are in NFL stadiums.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also very important. And does that team, are they ready to bring us in? Are they ready and willing to bring us in? And most are. We get great cooperation from our NFL partners. So it's really, what does that city offer beyond just giving us a great stadium, but do they give us everything else that we need? The hotels around the stadium, the event space around the stadium, the airport, and just, the kinds of things that make for a very smooth but spectacular event is really important to us. And we look at them very closely, and we also try to look at geographics. We don't want them to all be in the same section of the country all the time. We want fans to have, an opportunity to maybe not have to travel as far if their team. We don't obviously know who's going to be playing in the game, but if we spread it out and have it at different parts of the stadium, we don't look like we're being biased, in who we're picking. So there's a lot that goes into it, but really, we're looking for a spectacular event and a destination-type city that can host it.
We've got a new stadium that's under construction just up the road here in Nashville. I know that they've already said that they're going to bid for the national championship game and a Super Bowl. Then you got stadiums like in Cleveland, Ohio, Chicago, Washington, D.C. They're all going to be built, and all of those stadiums are going to have fixed roofs. In your opinion, let's say, unless you're like deep in Florida or maybe in Pasadena or somewhere like that, having a roof, is that a criteria that you really are, I guess, is that a bias towards you that there's no rain can affect the play on the field?
Yeah, I will say that if it's in a cold weather city, having a fixed roof is imperative. Because we don't want snow on the championship game. And so that's very important to us. And obviously, we will play in places, and we do in our quarters and semis. Like you mentioned, Pasadena, we play in places without roofs, right? But that place is built to play without a roof. It's okay. But some places aren't.
Right.
Cleveland, that'd be a rough one.
Yes, that would be. It would.
Yeah. But with a roof, we can make it work. And so we do look at that, and it's important. Weather is important, too. Looking at where we're going to go at that time of year, that's January 20th-ish, we want to see what the weather patterns like in that place. And that goes into our calculus, but, we are and have gone into some cold weather. We went to Indianapolis, and it was cold. Shoot, it was cold in Atlanta last year.
Yep.
It was freezing.
Yeah.
So, weather's a factor, but it's not, it's not a make or break kind of thing.
Once again, Rich Clark, the executive director of the College Football Playoff, joining the drive here. And, Rich, I just want to say this. You've came onto a show right here in the heart of volunteer country, talking to a Notre Dame guy, an Ohio State guy, and a Georgia Bulldog guy. And I think you've passed the test pretty well. You've done a great job with that. But the last thing I've got for you, and I know Jacob's got one more question, is as far as the committee goes picking for the playoff, if you have a team, for example, that traditionally is in a pretty strong conference and has a pretty good schedule, years that their schedule might not have the body of work by scheduling, in conference games where the teams just might not be as good that year, how much of an effect does that have on their selection?
Well, it can have an effect, but if they win their games and they win the games that they're supposed to win from the committee's standpoint, then they're gonna be okay. And we understand that you're not going to have this incredible schedule strength every year, but win the games that you're supposed to win. You shouldn't lose to teams that are weaker than you or teams that maybe have a weaker schedule than you. So, but I will say, if you have a very strong schedule and you win in that, your chances go up pretty significantly. Yeah. So, some of it is a bit of the draw of what you get, and the committee tries to understand that. That's why we have human beings on the committee. They look at that, and they are able to discern how a team does with the given strength of schedule that they have.
All right, General Clark, final question we have for you. You've led at the highest levels of combat in the classroom, on the football field, and now in the college football world. For our young listeners out there chasing their dreams and the families that are trying to support them, what advice would you give them about staying the course, overcoming setbacks, and becoming the kind of leader that you have become today?
Boy, that's a really good question. So my main advice to anyone is to lead with your values. Whatever you're doing, you have to consider that you are doing it to the best of your ability, but most importantly, you're doing it with your values out front. And what do I mean by values? So here at the CFP, we have really 3 core values that we talk about. And those values are integrity, humility, and excellence. And I'll give you a quote. Have you ever heard of a philosopher, Lao Tzu? He's an ancient Chinese philosopher, 500 BC. And he had a great quote, and I'm sure you've heard this quote. Your thoughts become words, your words become actions, your actions become habits, and your habits become your character. Your character is your destiny. Character is everything. And when you lead with your values, you lead with character, you will find success. And for us, our thoughts and words are those 3 values: integrity, humility, and excellence. But the word or the actions and the habits are most important. And we actually include those with our values. So if you're living and working with integrity, then you're a person that lives honorably. You live honorably in everything you do, whether it's your personal life or your professional life, you do it with honor. If you're living with humility, then you lift others. you lift others before yourself. And sometimes we've worked with people who will climb on the backs of the people that they work with or their teammates or their coworkers to find success. But be the kind of leader that leads with humility and lifts people ahead of you. Now, humility doesn't mean that you think less of yourself. It means that you think of yourself less, and you put others ahead of yourself and lift them instead of yourself. And that's what humility is all about. And excellence. Excellence is about elevating performance. And we've always heard, people say, well, excellence means you're the best. You're better than anybody else. Well, not necessarily. Excellence means that you elevate performance. And I have a saying, I always say there is no end to better. And elevating performance means that you're better today than you were yesterday. You're better this season than you were last season, or this year than you were last year. You're always, always constantly striving to get better, and it's a mindset that you have. So leading with your character, leading with your values is what's going to take you to your true destiny. Integrity, humility, excellence. Live honorably, lift others, elevate performance. That's the key in my mind. And then the other one is do something that you are passionate about. Do something that you love. I've heard people say, if you're doing something that you love, you never work a day in your life. And I have been so blessed to be able to do something in the Air Force that I loved. I was a pilot. I was at the Air Force Academy. Now I work in college football. I can't tell you how grateful I am to be here. But regardless, do it with character.
Great stuff, Rich. Man, we really appreciate you. Now, before we let you go, I got to get a biased answer from you. I want biased. The Air Force Thunderbirds or the Navy Blue Angels?
Oh, there's no bias. This is fact. The Air Force Thunderbirds every day, any day. That's a fact. Come on.
I love it.
That's good stuff.
Rich, man, we thank you. We thank you so much, man, and we hope that we can get you on again sometime in the future, man.
Any day, any day. I love talking to you guys, and let me just say I appreciate what you do for college football for sure, college athletics definitely, but really just all sports. We appreciate you guys being there and representing us. So thank you, and thanks for having me on today.
All right, Rich. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Rich Clark, the executive director of the college football playoff, and man, boy, this guy, he didn't disappoint, did he?
No, what a great interview.
That speech there at the end, like the advice, like I
got chills.
I'm clipping it.
He just got me hyped
and
up.
I'm playing it for every athlete that I run into.
Do you guys remember who did he say that was the quote?
Some guy from China, 500 BC.
I was going to ask if you grew up with him, Jim. I wasn't sure if you might know that guy or not. But.
Yeah, I went to elementary school with him. Yeah, exactly.
But hey, listen, with that interview, I think it's safe to say the drive has arrived. Thanks to Jim Gum for lining that up for us. Let's go ahead. Hey, right here, Jim Gum, baby. That was great. He lined that up for us. Hey, with that, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, got to talk about the Atlanta Braves trying to take care of business in the rubber match tonight against the can we call them the Sacramento A's?
Call them the Sacramento A's.
Sacramento A's.
We got to get Austin to know that where they're playing.
That's right. When we come back right here on ESPN Cleveland 101.3.
The Drive will be back after a quick timeout. Stay tuned for more nonstop sports talk on The Drive, presented by Hardees.